Why are we obsessed with the royal family? I don't know if you know this, when Princess Diane was tragically killed, her funeral was watched by close to 2.5 billion people. For some reason, it really consumes people all over the world, including and especially in America, the United States, the royal family. Now, we know they have no power. They don't have any political power. They have no legal power. It's very much something that is a symbolic monarchy. So why are we so obsessed with them? Now, this recent interview with Oprah, Meghan Markle and Prince Harry, yes, they were very blunt and very candid, was watched by who knows how many people. I don't even know the numbers. Yet again, just brings to the surface, what is this obsession? Now, if you're a cynic, you can say, well, people are really bored, and they're always looking for something, the same obsession, and why People magazine and Us magazine and We magazine and all these magazines that really are all sensationalistic, short-term interests. Very few of us will go back to a People magazine for a few months ago, let alone a few years ago, unless you're really bored. And some way we get stimulated vicariously, living vicariously through others, through superstars, whether they be actors or actresses, through sports heroes, through music, rock stars, and including that also would include the royal family. So it's essentially a good way to distract yourself from your own life. So you get obsessed with the storyline of someone else's life, the narrative of someone else's life. I remember once speaking about soap operas, hearing from people who are really addicted to soap operas. They have to see each episode, and if they can't see it, they record it. When we know it's a fictional story, and yet people follow it. And often you may think that the reason for that is it's easier to live your life through someone else. I don't know if you remember, there was a while back, I don't even know if it's still popular, there was a website called Second Life. You actually signed up a subscription which was not cheap, thousands of dollars, and you could build a second life. A life, in other words, not your actual life, a second life. What you want to look like, what type of friends you want to hang out with, what social settings, where you travel, how wealthy you are. And people actually pay to live this second life, which tells you that most of us, or many of us, are not necessarily happy with the life we're living, so we are living through others. And those others, when you really put them under the microscope, or not even under a microscope, are not exactly good role models. You start finding out things about people and you say, wow. But then again, it's all part of the drama, and all part of the tension and resolution that life is so much defined by. And it's easier to live through others. Like, I remember one of my Russian cousins came over from the country in Russia, and they play soccer. So he asked one of our family members, he says, are you into sports? He says, yeah. What sports? He says, football, baseball, basketball. He says, really, you play all that? He says, no, I watch it almost on a daily basis. So he began to laugh, because by him, the concept of watching was not really practical. They played the game. So yes, the joke goes that, today COVID, of course, has changed the way sports is being viewed and people attending stadiums and so on. But in the good old days, so to speak, BC, before COVID, the joke was that 90,000 people let's say 60,000 people in a baseball stadium who are watching 60,000 people who need to lose weight are watching 18 people who don't. That's how the joke went. So there is the element of voyeurism, of watching others live out their lives, and in many ways it stimulates us, even though we don't have to pay the price, for good or for bad. So that's a cynical take on life, and you could definitely dismiss the obsession with the royal family as that. On the other side, people are a little more serious or like to be taken seriously, like to point out, you're right, the royal family doesn't have any true inherent value, but there's value in the fact of their consistency. It's over 1,000-year-old monarchy. We live in a world of so change and impermanence, that things are always shifting. There's something about a comfort, a security that comes when you know something's been lasting so long. 1,000-year-old monarchy. So yes, there was a time where the monarchs had power and control. They don't have that now. It's symbolic, as I said, but nevertheless, just the fact that they're there, they're respected as such. And there's a certain element to having fantasy in our lives. We like to fantasize. The royal family, wealth, aristocracy. Yes, Harry and Meghan did punch some holes in that myth by showing the weakness and the vulnerability. But there's something about that type of vision. It's like people who are consumed and obsessed with billionaires, the billionaire lifestyle. When you really get into it, you find out they're not very happy in many cases. Their families often are arguing, and there are many other dysfunctionalities going on. But still, there's something about the glamour of it all. And listen, the human condition is very complex and very diverse. So I'm not here to knock and say, hey, these things don't have any value. Listen, if somebody finds some comfort, even in a very superficial thing, so be it. Does that really bode well for our own potential and where we're going to go with our lives? Well, we'll talk about that in a moment. But that is, on the basic level, this is what you usually hear. You either hear a dismissive type of cynical approach. Okay, listen, people are always living vicariously through others, and why is the crown, the royal family different? Or that there are some elements that seem to conjure up and evoke feelings of, as I said, consistency, a certain time-tested, people respect something that's been around for a long time. And in England itself, in Great Britain, there's that element of a certain nationalistic pride that the Queen now represents. She's been around a long time. But in general, her whole line of the throne that goes back, as I said, close to 1,000 years. There's the pomp and circumstance, the royal weddings, the royal funerals, and a lot of it which is very much similar to why we are taken by and consumed with parades and different celebrations. We know they're not necessarily always profound or reflecting any profound experience, but they have a symbolism to them, and there's a certain celebration. Human beings like to celebrate. And part of celebration does have elements of fantasy and non-realistic illusions that we all go through. We all dream and so on. Dream of being a king, being a queen. Which child doesn't have such enchanted ideas and fantasies and so on? But to go a step deeper, and which is what I'd like to do, and touch upon some of the points I had made about what exactly we do actually value. There was the Rebbitzin, my great teacher's wife, who passed away in 1988. So she had gone through a pretty difficult life. She was a queen in many of our eyes. Her behavior, her demeanor, her personality, the daughter of great Rebbe, great spiritual master. I had met her several times. She was once asked, and she had gone through everything, as I said. She was born in 1901 in the Tsarist Russia, which again was a monarchy, and she went through the Russian Revolution, World War I, World War II, ended up with her husband first in Berlin and then in Paris in Europe, and then ultimately came to the United States actually 80 years ago in the month of June. And so she really went through the whole the ups and downs and the from worst to the best of times, you can say, in our history, especially of the 20th century. First half being the worst, the second half being perhaps the most prosperous and the best. She was once asked, what was the best time in your life? When did you feel the best time? Would you describe the best time in your life? And her response, without hesitating, she said, right now. In other words, a person who really lives fully, they don't rely on stimulation, external stimulation, is always that moment is their best moment, because that's where they are right now, and they're going to make the best of it. If you had asked that question to her 50 years ago, or 70 years ago, when she was living in very different circumstances, not in a free America, but in a Nazi-controlled Europe, or in a Tsar or communist-controlled Russia and former Soviet Union, the answer would have been the same. because it's not about the circumstances around you, it's about who you are and how you navigate through them. So, though there is definitely value people being entertained, just like you go to a movie or you listen to music or read a book or travel, many of us need that. That's part of our nourishment. And not all of it is empty. Some of it is very interesting, intriguing. But even the more superficial things that some of us turn to, so that definitely satisfies a certain aspect of ourselves. But the introspective soul, the person who is looking for the transcendence in life and everything that we're doing, will not allow themselves to be distracted by the superficial. So for all, God bless them all, God bless the Queen, and God bless all the royalty, may they all be well and fine. At the end of the day, what does it have to do with your life? That's the question I would ask. How does that change your life? Is their behavior, is their role modeling, are their politics and their infighting going to change something in your life? Now, of course, everything is a lesson in life. The Baal Shem Tov, the great mystic, the great master, said, everything you see and hear is a lesson, including the fact that people are obsessed with the royal family. That also teaches us about human beings. But on a personal note, we're speaking heart to heart, soul to soul. That's the question you have to also always ask yourself. How does it affect you and your children and your family and your immediate situation in life? When I say immediate, I mean what you're living through. Your ups, your downs, your pains, your joys, your purpose in life. Are you fulfilling your purpose in life? Now, if the royal family can help inspire you in that direction, by all means, because you have become a better person. The challenge I would pose is that many of the things that stimulate us don't affect us in any way. It's only about vicarious living. It's only about observing others. I began writing a poem once. I watch people, watch people, watch people, watch people. Then I really didn't have a punchline because it just would be lines and lines. People watching people, watching people, watching people. Like the blind leading the blind. Of course, that is a way of living, but it's not a way that I would call meaningful living. So the question that we have to ask ourselves is, if you take a lesson, by all means, just give you an example. Chassidim, which were the mystics and the spiritual Jews at the time in Russia, when the Tsar fell, when the Tsar was overthrown and taken over by the Soviets, the Bolsheviks, and the different stages that went through. So some Chassidim were saddened. Why were they saddened? They said, we lost an analogy. We lost a metaphor for the idea of absolute authority, of absolute kingship. Because the Tsar was a king. A king had absolute authority. Now we all are actually recoiled at the concept of absolute authority because we know how it was abused and how it was distorted and in many ways hurt people. And as a Jew, I can say that outright. We've been hurt by that type of absolute power. Absolute power absolutely corrupts. But nevertheless, when you're dealing with, let's say, a benevolent monarch, a benevolent leader, so there's an element of that absolute authority that teaches us about being accountable to something greater than ourselves. This has nothing to do with the individual who's king or queen. It has to do with a model. And in that sense, there's a tremendous lesson, that idea of absolute authority. Unfortunately, royalty today is not exactly that case in Great Britain, in the United Kingdom. But nevertheless, that idea of having something that's like a model. Now, it's interesting. I read a book recently. Some of you may have seen it. It's called what is it called? It'll come to me in a moment. But it's a case that he makes a case for how democracy was born. And he says in the book that was when the Bible was beginning to be translated into English. So the first time many people were exposed to its ideas. And there's a story there that became a very powerful story. The story where Samuel, the prophet Samuel, rejects the request of the Jewish people for a king. The name is not coming to me. Oh boy. Okay. So they request a king, and King Samuel says to them, "What do you need a king? You have God." So the question, of course, ultimately he turns to God, and God says to Samuel, "Give them a king." Now the question is asked. The Bible says there's an actual command: appoint a king. So why was Samuel upset? Because he recognized they were not looking for a king for the true reason. The king in the Torah, in the Bible, is meant to be an epitome, the personification of humility. A king that's totally humble and totally dedicated to a higher power, to God. That would be a role model for the people. The people were not seeking that. They wanted a model. They saw all nations have their nationalistic, they have their flag, they have their colors, and they want their king. It was more out of ego and pride to be able to say, we also have wealth and we also have opulence and so on. That's what Samuel recognized. God said, still, give them a king. Slowly they'll come to understand what a true king is about. So it's interesting, we, including myself, we are, as I said, repulsed by the very idea. King George Washington was very wise. He would not accept being a king because he understood what absolute power can be for a human being. If there's utter no humility and utter selflessness, and the king is nothing but a channel for something higher and greater, by all means. But we know that that's not very common. So the very concept has value when you appreciate its context. Unfortunately, the royal family is not exactly the symbol of humility and the symbol of godliness or the symbol of purity, of no intention. It's more about really just having a lot of wealth, a lot of privilege, and being a symbol, exactly what Samuel was rejecting. And the truth is that that has in it, as I said, what difference does it make to you? Which brings me back to that question. What difference does it make in your life? And you can apply this to any piece of news. All the sensationalism out there, in all the magazines and online and social media, whatever it may be, yes, it's titillating, it can be stimulating, it keeps you busy for a while, for a short while, but it's like sugar at best, and sometimes even worse. But the thing that hurts most, in a way, is that it distracts you from being yourself. You have so much potential. You are a king and a queen in your own right. The line I always use in my book, Toward a Meaningful Life, birth is God saying you matter. You have indispensable value. In the Kabbalistic model, we have the 10 spheres. The 10th sphere is Malchut, kingship. You are a king. You are a queen. Not because of wealth, not because you have so many people serving you, not because people respect you, because you fundamentally have a dignity inside of you that's inherent to you. So often, by distracting ourselves and looking, oh, that's the royal family. No, you're the royal family. You're a royal individual. No, I'm not saying that they are to blame for us not having our self-esteem and self-respect. We're not talking about them individually. We're talking about the culture. We're talking about the fact that every step of the way is being watched and measured and paparazzi and the whole scene. That's what I'm discussing here. But that takes us away from focusing on your own king and queen. Are you behaving like a king, like a queen? Where's your dignity, your majesty? And you have it. The inherent value that you have in life, that you were put here on this earth to fulfill and to realize a purpose and a contribution that you and only you can make. You know, when a mother stares into her newborn child, that is dignity, is that unconditional love. I wish we all had mothers and fathers like that taught us on a daily basis. You are so special. You're a gift. I don't own you. You were given to me as a gift to protect, to help cultivate your potential that you, as you grow into an adult, should be able to shine with your unique light, sing your special song, contribute your extraordinary art in making this world a more beautiful place. That is, above all, the most important message we need to be hearing and listening to, that we need to be hearing and sharing with others. So if a royal family can be a role model, an example, in some small way to teach us how to find our own inner dignity, by all means. If it's a distraction, that on the contrary is just completely nonsense, or even worse, you start seeing the infighting and it just becomes you're just vicariously watching someone else being entertaining you, then you can draw your own conclusions where that goes to. By no means, again, am I doing some blanket critique. I love everybody. I love everybody's interests. People can be intrigued with these things. I'm just trying to add a dimension about looking at ourselves in a more responsible way. So the same is true, as I said, just as it is with the royal family, the same can be with sports, with music, with other stars. Let's not replace them. Let's not let them replace ourselves. If we learn from them what excellence is, what beauty is, by all means. But at the end of the day, let it all inspire each one of us to be the majestic individual that you are. You were born an original. Don't become a copy. Don't become a conformist. Don't become someone that's just following others. Be a leader in your own right. And when you do that, you can achieve things that are far beyond our imagination. I know people who are not even aware that there are kings and queens out there. There was a story of a Hasidic, old Chassid in the Russia, and he sees people are celebrating. There's a new czar, and he was saying, 1 second, didn't they celebrate 30 years ago? He didn't even realize there was a change of command several times over. There's a certain beauty, a certain innocence to that one can admire. But the rest of us who are inundated and overwhelmed and are completely overstimulated by all that's being streamed into our consciousness, take control a little of what's coming into your life, and above all, whatever is coming in should serve as an example and teach you to become a more kingly, a more queenly, more dignified and majestic human being. Those are my thoughts for today, my friends. Simon Jacobson here. We're here every Sunday, live at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And it's all archived and all recorded. So please, if you liked what I said, share with others. Give us your comments. Like it. All the different ways of getting the word out there. Ripple effect. And let's stay in touch. I always look forward to hear from you. Be well. Be healthy. Demonstrate your majesty, your kingship, the king and queen that is really your birthright. Be well, everybody.